Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now. You may have noticed that in recent episodes, the Doctor seems to have got quite a passion for debut authors. I mean, let's face it, if we love our crime fiction, we love discovering new writers, new books. So this episode is going to be yet again one of those opportunities for me to say to you, here's a book you might not have heard of. Here's an author you might not have heard of. However, please take note and get yourself a copy of On the Edge. Great pleasure to welcome into the console station, Jane Jesmond. Jane, hello, how are you?
Hi, Jackie. I'm great. And thank you very much for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. Now, I wonder, would you do us the honours? Because I've been reading your work online and I can't waft a copy of the book, sadly.
But nothing would give me more pleasure.
How beautiful. Look at that. Look at that. Absolutely glorious. Yeah. How does it feel?
Oh, I can't tell you. I mean, it's just wonderful. There is nothing like holding your own book for the first time. And I mean, like many debut authors, it's taken me a long time to get to this point. So it's utterly thrilling. There is nothing much that can beat it.
Glorious, glorious. And it's so good to celebrate this with you. Now, On the Edge is published by Verve Books, and it is out in the UK on the 26th of October. So whenever you see this, hopefully it'll be just after it's been released. So as I say, do get yourself a copy. It is a Times and a Sunday Times Crime Club pick. So honestly, a great, atmospheric, thrilling read. Jane, you just said, though, that there's nothing quite like it. And you also said that, like many a debut author, for that first book to appear, it takes a while. And so I wonder, could you give us some background as to the origins and the journey of this book to the fact that you can now cradle it there with loving care?
Right. I started writing seriously. I've always written a bit, especially when I was a child. Mm-hmm. But at some point life took over, the need to earn a living took over. And I only wrote bits and pieces. But about 10 years ago, I started writing much more seriously. And I wrote a first novel, which, like many authors, is confined to a drawer somewhere and will never see the light of day.
You never know. You never know.
Well, you do never know. And when I realized that this wasn't going to be the overnight success that I, maybe in my innocence hoped it would be, I started to want to write a second novel. Mm-hmm. And so I think I was very open to looking around for an idea. Now, I live in Brittany in France, and the coast where I live is very dangerous, and there are a lot of lighthouses. And one night I was driving home in the dark, stormy night, and I went past a particularly magnificent lighthouse that's just down the road from us. And I don't know why, but I just stopped and got out and looked up at it with its beam going round and round in the dark. And then just suddenly the idea for the opening of On the Edge came to me. Storm, lighthouse, somebody unconscious hanging from it. And that was really the main inspiration for it. The character of the main protagonist came to me pretty much at the same time. Mm-hmm. I like to think she practically got in the car with me when I drove home.
I love what you say. Yeah.
And so with that, I then set off and wrote the first draft, and it was a great thing. I really, really, really enjoyed writing that first draft. Got to the end of it, and then the real work started. and it's gone through a lot of rewriting to become the book it is.
What strikes me though is that you, in what you tell us now, so you didn't give up on this second book, because the first one is in a drawer, but this one didn't seem to let you go, or could you not let it go? How did it work?
Well, I initially obviously tried to get it published, and in the process I got a lot of feedback, and actually I then pretty much rewrote it. I stripped out about 3/4 of the plot and tightened it up, and in between doing that, I've written other things. I quite like working like that. I spend time producing a draft, and then I'll go and work on something else, and then come back to it with a fresh viewpoint. But to be honest, I had pretty much given up on it until about 2 years ago. I went back, I read it again, because there always has been something about the opening scene and something about Jen Shaw, who's the main protagonist, that I have been unable to let go. And I read it again and I thought, no, I can do better than this. I rewrote it once again and sent it out yet again. And this time, well, Verve Books wanted it, and it's been marvelous ever since, really.
I'm struck by, and you're not the first author that I've met in the consultation room and talked like this about, but it's almost as if there is a story there that has to be told, and it might not get told in its first iteration, and it might not get told at its first, second, third, fourth, fifth submission, whatever, but in the end it will out.
I absolutely agree, because I think it is quite hard work and quite lengthy writing a book, and if there isn't something about it that absolutely grabs you and won't let you go, I wonder if you'd be able to do that much work, to write however many drafts it takes you to get there. For me, it was largely a question of throwing away all the extraneous bits and pieces and just actually focusing on the heart of the story itself.
Yeah, thank you. Now, so you've mentioned your main protagonist, and Jen Shaw, or Jennifer,
I think, but
Jennifer.
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, because I have to ask you about this. Now, we began our conversation and it was so atmospheric, and you were driving along the Brittany coast, but your story's set in Cornwall. So, I mean, I know there's not, I know there are links, cultural links and geographical links, but I'm really intrigued as why you sent it over the channel, as it were, for it to develop there and not where you are.
I think, although the initial inspiration certainly came from the lighthouse at St Matthew's Point down the road from me, I don't think I would ever have written it anywhere than Cornwall, partly because, as you say, the local coast does remind me hugely much. You see, my mother's family come from Cornwall, and so I spent a lot of time there as a child, holidays and things like that. And it's a wonderful county to set a story in, and it always was going to be Cornwall, to the extent that it almost became another character in the story as I wrote it. I'd try and think of, I'd come up with a scene, and the place where the scene was set would come straight. I could see it, I could feel it. And also, I think, to me, Cornwall is a very romantic place. with its association with the sea, with smuggling, with shipwrecks, with with rescues. It's just a very exciting place somehow, very stimulating to write about in a story.
And you talk about shipwrecks and things being washed up, and at the start we could say that very much about Jen, could we not? That in her in her personal life, she is a troubled soul,
yeah,
who has been struggling with addiction, and yet there's this aspect of her that brave and fearless, and we understand that because of her, I was going to say, passion. It is a passion, and is it also an addiction of climbing? I mean, because we see her up on this lighthouse, however she may have got there, whatever that's about. But we learn as the book goes on that she, climbing for her was the reason for being. And you write that so passionately. So I wondered, could you tell us, are you a fond climber?
No, Jackie.
What? Surely not.
I am terrified of heights. I am strictly no more than 2 rungs up a step ladder sort of person. And I have always been fascinated by people who are capable, who want to take, those sorts of physical risks, and who are, who live for it, really. So in some respects, part of the attraction of Jen for me was to explore that side of her personality, and for me to try and understand, how she could do it.
I think it reminds me sort of like that, feel the fear and do it anyway. That you've been able to approach something that makes you extremely nervous, thanks to a character who, if you gave them a choice, it would probably be the last thing that they would do, because, it's just that second nature to them. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, so I wonder, could you though just give us the background to Jen and a little bit about her family, again, always without giving too much away, but because the family dynamic in this book is so important as well.
Okay, so Jen, first of all, about Jen, the key thing to Jen is that she is a passionate climber. She loves taking risks. She loves danger. And her style of climbing is reflected in that. She, at the beginning of the book, I don't think I'm giving too much away if I say that she has stopped climbing for various reasons, and has had to find another outlet, really, which for all those thwarted passions, let's call it. And for me, a large part of the rest of the book is her exploring how she got to that point. Hang on, I've lost my train of thought. Yes, so Jen. And so for her, part of that, I think, is going back to Cornwall, to where she was born, where she was brought up, and somehow that gives her an opportunity to look back on some of the things that have happened to her. And it also brings her slap bang up amongst her family. Her very new agey hippie mother.
She's like, I love her. Yeah, but yeah.
Well, I do too. And her very absent father, who is the mountaineer of the family, and who doesn't appear in the book at all, but obviously has cast a long shadow. And her brother Kit, who is in deep problems, trying to, mainly of debt, in dealing with the renovation of the family home. And so there's quite an interesting dynamic going on between them all, I think. And yeah, I had fun exploring it, particularly with Jen's mother, who she was very much another character who kind of came to me fully fleshed and pretty much alive.
I mean, I never like to ask this because you never know whether people have drawn on, you know, either relatives or people known to them. But Jen's mother, is she someone that you know?
No, honestly, she isn't. I mean, there are obviously bits and pieces of her that have come from people who I've met, or even, you know, just things I've read. But no, I just know who she is. You know, if I met her tomorrow, I'd go, oh, there you are. But no, I never consciously base a character on another person anyway. I find that quite constraining, actually.
Lovely, thank you. Now, so if we stop a minute in Cornwall and you know, that romantic, wild spot, I wonder, is there a place there that is your favorite? That if they said to you, you can only go and visit one place there now, where would you go and why?
I would probably go to Gribben Head, which is in between Foy and Parr on the coastal path. It looks very much like a lighthouse, but it isn't. It's what they call a day mark. I would go there because the view from there is fabulous. And the walk up from Pridmouth Cove, which is where I spent many a lovely day as a child, the walk up there over the green leading up to Gribben Head itself is one of my fondest memories.
Thank you. Because as somebody who I think I may have only ever been once in my lifetime. Yeah, I know that it's a trip that still waits to be done. I have so many friends who, you know, even during, you know, these COVID times when they've had a chance to be able to, you know, go somewhere, they go to Cornwall. It's their favorite place to go holiday, go visit. And you know, it's something that must be done. I've got that on the list now, definitely. But I have to ask you this, and I hope you don't mind, because when I received your book, the title gripped me straight away, but then so did your name. Yeah, and as anybody who's watching will see that your name has popped up here, Jane Gorman, and so I'm wondering, Jane Jesmond, I presume it's a pen name, but you know, for those of us who are from the Northeast, it's a glorious pen name. Why Jesmond?
Why Jesmond? Well, my real name is not Jesmond. It's Shufflebotham, and it wasn't a very popular choice for an author. So I decided to write under a pen name, and I was born in Jesmond, in Newcastle. So it's a lovely name, Jane Jesmond.
You know, and
I'm a northern lass at heart.
You really are, and such good things come from the Northeast. Oh, Jesmond, beautiful. That's a lovely story. But just to stick with your family name, well, the fact that it's from your dad, and at the front of your book, you have a lovely dedication to your dad. Can you talk to us about, you know, why that? Can you talk to us about your dad?
My dad was, sadly now, a very special person. He, in his later years, he died very recently.
So
and
sorry.
when I first decided to do the dedication, he was still alive. But like, you know, so many people, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. And I was, oh, sorry, I'm not upset. I'm just thinking about him, and it's a lovely thought, because he was my darling dad. He gave me so much throughout his life, really supported me, and was very keen that I was the person I was meant to be, rather than fitting into society's views of how a woman should be. And so that was very important to me. And in his latter years, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. And I was just so struck during those years by the effort he made to make life easy for everyone around him. So when it came to dedicating my book, there really was no choice. He was the only one.
He sounds like an absolutely amazing kind of dad. You know, when you say that for him it was the idea of, you know, there's no boxes that you have to fit into. You just have to be who you are. And I think, you know, parents who allow us to be, that's absolutely wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Now, I don't know if when you were writing this, you had this feeling, but for me, I got the sense of a real quest novel. It's almost like a double quest, because Jen's battling with herself, but she's also battling with the idea of, and I don't think it gives anything away, because it's, you know, it's there in the publicity, you know, that she's come to on this lighthouse, and, you know, the quest to find out, how did this happen? So again, when you were working this, did you have in the back of your mind, you know, those great classic quests, or has it just formed in that way?
I think it's, for me, it's what brings a book alive when I'm reading. If the central character, or at least the central character, has something they have to find out about themselves, something they have to reconcile about themselves, they have some sort of internal challenge. For me, it's one of the great drivers that drives the story, drives the narrative along. And it's the thing I remember most about books when I've finished them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a great mystery, a great plot, lots of excitement. I mean, I really do. I'm an absolute sucker for all that. But somehow it's the central character who holds all that together, who holds all that in her hands. And if that's not not informed by her own needs, her own quest, that's the kind of book I love to read. And so I guess it was bound to come out in my writing.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, and you don't shy away from difficult subjects, though. You know, I'm thinking about, you know, Jen struggling with drugs. You know, and you could have chosen, you know, different flaws. What sort of like led you to choosing that would be the thing she would be struggling with?
It just felt right, and I just felt that was where she might well end up. And I don't, as a writer, I don't want to be frightened of tackling, even though I'm writing thrillers, and even though it's meant to be a fun read, I nevertheless think, you know, if you can include as much reality as is possible, you know, that also adds a grit and a dimension to a book. And you know, sometimes things come into my head and I can't write if I think if I think that's the way Jen would have gone, I can't write it differently. Or it's one of the things I couldn't have changed. There are loads of things I could and did change.
Yeah.
But that felt very central to it, really. And I was also, just going slightly back to the Cornwall thing. I mean, I was brought up on the 4 and 20 ponies trotting through the dark, and all. If I'm presuming you're familiar with that.
Not at all. Do explain.
I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a poem about Cornish smuggling, 4 and 20 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk, and it's a slight romanticisation of Cornish smuggling, which in reality was a pretty criminal, violent, and unpleasant undertaking in many ways. And so I always had that slight conflict going on, if you like, for me, between that side of Cornwall, the romantic side of Cornwall, and also the real Cornwall as well. And I think that's quite an interesting thing to have going in a novel, in a thriller.
Yeah, and interesting, isn't it, that you explained to us, about a rhyme that is from, a time past, and yet the present, the contemporary difficulty with drugs, county lines, and what that does to that local population. Now I have another character to ask you about, and it's the mysterious Nick Crawford.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So you bring in this outsider into the story, and I just wonder, again, it's always tricky because I know we can't say too much, but was he an element that came after many rewritings that you've spoken about, or has he always been there as long as Jen's been there?
No, he's been there as long as Jen's been there. It's when I first had the opening scenes, which is the lighthouse, and then the chapters immediately, the chapter where Jen meets Nick on the coast road, have always been in the book, along with Jen's mother. And there are a few other things that have never changed, but most of the rest of it has changed dramatically. And so yes, no, he's always been there. He's always been there. I'm really not sure what else I could say about him, though.
Oh, it's fine. I think it's important for readers to discover him themselves. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. You mentioned about memory.
Yes.
I mean, Jen's memories of the past. But to me as well, there's another element in this book that I think is so important, and it's that element of trust.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about that element.
Trust. It's trust. Okay, so it is an important issue, and it's, funnily enough, it's one that I'm currently writing book 2 in the series.
Oh.
And it's one that has becomes much more important in book 2. But yes, in book 1, I mean, a lot of the trust issues are Jen's. She tries to decide, mainly whether, to a great extent, whether she can trust herself, whether she can trust her judgment, and obviously while she's exploring how she ended up dangling off a lighthouse, that raises a lot of trust issues with her family. Did they have something to do with it? And with the other people that she meets. So she's on very, very unsteady ground throughout, throughout most of the thriller, trying to work out who she can trust. Can she trust herself? Can she trust her memories?
Yeah. Now, so you bring us this. I mean, she is a fascinating, unreliable narrator. I mean, she really is. And I'm intrigued by now what you've just told us, because I thought, I mean, the way this, it seemed to me a story that would close, but no, when did you know that this wouldn't be a one-off?
Mainly when I took the last 2 chapters off the end, because the book didn't need them.
Mm-hmm.
And realized that I took them off because the book didn't need them. It finished in the right place. But when I did take them off, I also knew that there were a whole host of other things, other places that I wanted Jen to go to. And I really could at any time over the last couple of years have sat down and started writing the second book, but something just stopped me until I knew that the first book was going to be published. But there's a whole host of, there's a lot of future for Jen, a lot of future.
Will she keep climbing?
I don't think I can tell you that. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like life sometimes seems to be cyclic in a way, that things that we were extremely passionate about, things that took up so much of our time, and then for one reason or another, good or bad, get left behind.
Yes.
And somehow they come back to us, and we're offered that opportunity to engage again or not, as the case may be. So yeah,
there may be a bit of climbing.
Sorry, it's very, what's the word? It's very selfish, to want writers to write a certain way. It's like, this is really good, please do some more. Of course, it's got to be how the novel progresses and how you feel about it. I totally get that. My next question is often a tricky one, but I think, I think again, as readers, it helps us appreciate just the work and the effort that goes in to a story that we can enjoy. In all the times that you've grappled with the manuscript and the ideas, which is the one bit that might have caused you sleepless nights, or which is the aspect that left you totally exasperated?
Oh, I wonder if there is just one bit.
Or if you can't do that, which is the bit that you are proudest of within the text? And again, I think this is going to be hard for you, because I've noticed, when we started talking, you are so excited about this book, and to single out anything about it might be utterly impossible.
Okay, I'm probably proudest. They're not necessarily, which doesn't necessarily mean that the best bits, by any way. But the bits that excited me most as I wrote them, and that I have not, and it wasn't a false excitement, because they're not bits I've gone back and gone, whoa, what was I thinking of when I wrote this, which happens a lot, are some of the climbing bits, and probably the whole sequence of the chase across the rain-swept moors. That's about 2/3 or so the way through the book. I cannot tell you how much fun I had writing that. And I just loved the way everything for me as a writer just knitted together at that point. The characters, the Cornwall, the sequence of events, it just all came together. I loved that bit. And I still confession, I still enjoy reading it.
Beautiful. It's like initially when I asked that question, people are like, oh, and then you begin to talk, and it, and the joy again that is there. Again, it's the last year and a half have been tricky for society at large, the creative industries in particular, and I wonder again the fact that there you are located in France, Banjul, I'm thinking of, to be able to, do you need to go back to Cornwall to be able, to be in the Cornwall mode, or is it so within you that it's fine?
For me, it was fine because it is so within me. However, I would have liked to have gone back when I was doing the main editing for it, just to check a few things out. But I think it's fine. I think it's fine that the places are they're places I remember. Heaven knows somebody may have built a house on one of them, but
yeah.
And also the internet is a wonderful thing for research. Google Maps, Google Earth, all those sorts of things. It is really helpful if you actually want some specifics. But having said that, I do much prefer to go to a place. There are just little details that you can't get if you're not there.
But hopefully, in the not too distant future, reasonably easy travel again, will be there for us to enjoy. I don't want to ask you what or where we will find Jen up to in the next book, because we should delight in what we have at the moment. What's to come can wait for us in the future, though I do hope you and I can come back together again when the next time, because I think I'm intrigued to see what happens with this woman. Jane, I just want to thank you so much for taking this time out and to come and share with us, your joy about this text, but the thrill that's there as well, and and there's moments of, as you say, those thrills and that breathtaking stuff. It's quite dark as well in places. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, life is quite dark, and I think but life is dark. Sometimes it's dark, and sometimes it's wonderful, and I like that. I like that mix in a book.
Yeah, you've captured that beautifully. That life is made up of those elements. Just sometimes some people find themselves in even darker places. Yeah. So, as I say, I wish you all the very best with On the Edge, and I hope that we actually get the chance to do this face to face without screening the way at some point. I think that would be wonderful. I think if at all possible, maybe next year for Newcastle Noir, if you could come back too close to Jesmond.
I will.
Yeah, exactly. I would love that. I would love to welcome you to the festival. you know, and for us to be in conversation again about your protagonist, see what you've got to do in next time. Yeah.
I'd absolutely love to, Jackie. You know, absolutely. If travel is allowed, I'll be there.
Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, all the very best. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.